Welcome back to Under Baobab Skies. Tonight, we gather under these vast, star-strewn heavens to turn our gaze towards a crossroads. It's not just a place where two dusty paths meet beneath a looming silk cotton tree. It's a crossroads of time. A junction where the thunder of ancient gods rumbles through fiber-optic cables, where sacred chants are carried on invisible Wi-Fi signals, and where the face of the divine might be glimpsed not only in the flash of lightning, but in the soft, persistent glow of a smartphone screen. We are speaking of the Yoruba spiritual world, a universe as deep and complex as the cosmos above us. Here, the forces of nature and the threads of human destiny are personified in the Orishas, the powerful emissaries of Olodumare, the supreme creator, and among them, one stands as a king of fire, a lord of transformation or the god of thunder, lightning, justice, and dance. He is the drum that calls the storm into being. He is the double-edged axe that slices cleanly through falsehood, separating truth from deception. For centuries, Awo's voice was the deafening crash of a storm. His presence felt in the possession of his devotees as they spun in ecstatic dance. His will was revealed through the cryptic patterns of cowrie shells cast by a priest's knowing hand. His children, his followers, learned his desires through vivid dreams, through the body's involuntary tremors, through the intuitive wisdom passed down from elder to initiate in hushed tones. The medium was organic. It was physical, it was immediate. The connection was felt in the blood and the bone. But what happens when the ancient drum meets the modern mirror? What happens when the medium of the sacred message shifts from the boundless dreamscape to the defined digital landscape? When the sacred that divine life force, that spiritual authority must find a new way to flow through circuits and screens. The children of Oa, now scattered across the globe, from bustling Lagos to vibrant Havana to the streets of Brooklyn, are navigating this new, electrifying terrain. They are the generation facing a profound question, a question that redefines their faith. Can the Orisha ride the new lightning? Let's pause here for a moment. Imagine the fire crackling gently beside us, the night breathing softly all around. In its warm, flickering light, think of your own phone, that familiar slab of glass and metal you carry everywhere. It's a mirror, isn't it? It shows us ourselves and it shows us the world. But is it also a vessel? Can it hold a prayer? Can it carry a spirit across the digital ether? This is the heart of the matter we explore tonight. In our journey, we will follow our young apprentice, An-E, whose divine calling arrives not in a prophetic dream, but as a cryptic, unexpected text message. We will step into a temple where the ancient, thundering Bata drums are heard not just by those present, but by a global congregation tuning in across oceans via a live stream. We'll confront the strange reality of a predictive algorithm that seems to know the will of the gods with an accuracy that unnerves even some seasoned priests. And, most importantly, we will sit with an elderly priestess, a woman of immense wisdom and power, as she makes her final, poignant peace with the very technology she once feared would be the end of her tradition. This is a story of faith in flux. It's not a tale of tradition dying, but of tradition translating itself, learning a new language to speak to a new world. It is the story of the drum and the mirror, and the new, complex, and sometimes dissonant music they are beginning to make together. Stay with us as we explore this incredible collision of worlds. Subscribe and join our community as we continue to tell the stories hidden under the Baobab skies. Thank you for being here. In many ancient traditions, dreams are not just random firings of a sleeping brain. They are seen as sacred bridges, pathways where the divine communicates directly with mortals. It's a profound expectation, a cornerstone of faith. But what happens when that bridge doesn't appear? What happens when the awaited divine encounter is replaced by a silent night and the cold, unforgiving light of a new day? This is the story of that silence and the unexpected message it carried. The young man's name was Deo, a name that in his language, Yoruba, means joy arrives. But for 7 long nights, joy felt like a distant, unreachable shore. He was in the final, most intense phase of his initiation into the mysteries of Ar, the powerful Orisha of thunder, lightning, and justice. For weeks, he had immersed himself completely. He learned the ancient chants, the intricate histories, the complex, polyrhythmic beats of the Bartar drums that were said to be the very heartbeat of the thunder god himself. He had fasted, cleansing his body. He had purified his spirit with sacred herbs, their earthy, potent scents clinging to his skin. And each night, he slept on a thin, woven mat in a small, windowless room, its walls painted a deep, symbolic red within the hallowed grounds of the temple complex. He had done everything right, followed every rule, every ritual, with a desperate sincerity. The final instruction from his godfather, his spiritual guide, the wise Babalo Ifami, had been clear and absolute. He had looked into Deo's eyes, his own gaze holding the weight of generations of knowledge, and said, "Now, you wait. Awa will come to you in a dream. He will show you his face, or he will give you a sign. This is how he chooses his true children. The dream is the door, a simple instruction, but one that held the entire weight of Deo's future. The dream was not just a hope, it was a requirement, the final seal on his transformation. Without it, he was nothing, just a boy playing at being a man of faith." So, Deo waited, and that waiting was an ordeal in itself. Each night, as the sun set and the temple grew quiet, he would lie down on his mat with a heart hammering against his ribs, a turbulent mix of expectant terror and fervent hope. He strained his ears, listening to the sounds of the sprawling city outside the temple walls, the distant, muffled growl of late night traffic, the sharp bark of a lone dog, and he tried with all his might to will them into the signs he craved. He tried to hear the roaring of an approaching storm in the hum of an air conditioner. He imagined the clean, sharp smell of ozone that hangs in the air after a lightning strike. He lay perfectly still, hoping to feel the first tremors of divine possession begin in his limbs. Even in his sleep, a sign that the Erixa was near. He was ready, he was open, he was waiting. But the dreams that came were stubbornly, frustratingly mundane. They were echoes of his old life, not whispers of his new one. One night, he dreamt he was back in secondary school, standing on a stage, forgetting his lines in a school play, the faces in the audience blurring into a sea of disappointment. Another night, he was at a bus stop, the air thick with exhaust fumes, waiting for a bus that he knew, with a sinking certainty, would never arrive. On the third night, he dreamt of his mother's kitchen, the comforting smell of her jollof rice filling his senses, a dream so vivid it left him with a pang of homesickness when he woke. There was no thunder, no vision of the double-headed axe, Unji's famous symbol, no majestic, dancing figure wreathed in lightning and flame. Each morning, he woke to the same quiet room, the same grey dawn light filtering under the door, and the same crushing feeling in his gut. The cold morning felt like a personal failure, a judgment. Had he not purified himself enough? Were his chants not sincere? Was his faith, which he thought was so strong, actually insufficient? The silence of the Erixa was a physical weight on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The 7th morning was the hardest. In his tradition, 7 was a sacred number. It was the number of completion, of fulfillment. This was supposed to be the final night, the climax of his spiritual journey. If Al did not come on the 7th night, the elders might deem the initiation incomplete. Or worse, Far worse, they might conclude that Deo was not chosen at all. The shame of that possibility was a cold knot in his stomach. The thought of facing bibliophony, of seeing the disappointment in the old man's eyes, was more terrifying than any divine storm. That night, Deo didn't even try to sleep. He knew it would be useless. Instead, he sat on his mat, his back straight as a spear, a posture of respectful vigil, in a low, desperate whisper that barely disturbed the stillness of the room. He began to repeat the praise names of all, the Auric he had spent weeks memorizing. JJ, Dakujabu, Jia, Alaiki. Bah, Koso. He chanted them over and over, his voice growing hoarse. He offered up everything he had left, his raw anxiety, his fading hope, his overwhelming confusion. He offered it all up as a prayer, a desperate plea into the void. The night stretched on, long, silent, and agonizingly empty. The dream did not come. As the first faint hint of pink and orange began to paint the edge of the sky, visible as a thin line of light under the door, a profound exhaustion settled deep into his bones. It was an exhaustion that went beyond lack of sleep. It was the weariness of a soul that had hoped too hard and received nothing. It was mixed with a hollow, echoing despair. He felt empty. Had the ancient ways stopped working? Had the gods fallen silent? Had the door his Babelo spoke of, the door he had prepared his whole life to walk through, been closed and locked before he ever reached it? He was about to finally give in, to lie down in defeat and accept his failure, when a different vibration began. It wasn't in his soul or in the air around him. It was a physical buzzing coming from his pocket. The first hint of dawn was now clearly visible at the window slit high on the wall. Deo, his head bowed in utter defeat, was startled by a sudden, bright, buzzing light. It emanated from the pocket of his jeans, which he had folded neatly and placed beside his mat before his vigil began. A modern sound in an ancient space. A technological intrusion into a spiritual crisis. He stared at the glowing rectangle, bewildered. The vibration wasn't the tremor of a god, but the notification of his forgotten cell phone. Confused, weary, and with nothing left to lose, he reached for it. He unlocked the screen, his eyes blinking against the sudden brightness. And there, on the screen, was a message. A sign from a world he had tried so hard to leave behind for 7 days. It wasn't the dream he had been promised. But, as he read the words, a slow, dawning realization began to spread through him. Perhaps the door wasn't closed. Perhaps he had just been waiting for the wrong one to open. In the sacred stillness, where the only sound should have been the whisper of his own soul, a noise intruded. It was an alien sound, a sharp, digital buzz that felt like a tear in the fabric of reality. A pulse of white light followed, bleeding through the fabric of his jeans. For a moment, Deo was lost, disoriented. The sound belonged to the world outside the world of schedules, messages, and the constant hum of noise he had been trying to transcend for days. Then, with a jolt that felt like an electric shock, he remembered, in a moment of weakness 2 days ago, a sliver of worry about his mother had crept into his resolve. He had slipped his silenced phone into his pocket, a secret anchor to the life he'd left behind. He had completely forgotten it was there. A wave of shame, hot and suffocating, washed over him. An electronic device. Here, in the initiation room, it was a desecration, a violation of the purity of this space. A personal failure of the highest order. He fumbled for it, his first instinct to hurl it away, to cast out the offending object and the weakness it represented. But as his trembling fingers closed around the cool glass and metal, the screen lit up again. A notification, a text message. He squinted in the dim light of the single candle. The sender was not a saved contact. It was just a string of numbers. An international code he didn't recognize, anonymous, untraceable. The preview of the text glowed in the darkroom, and the words made his blood run cold. It started with emojis, a lightning bolt, a red circle, 2 crossed swords, followed by a short phrase in Yoruba, IKC, A, B, EGT. Deo's breath caught in his throat. His mind, which had been foggy with exhaustion and the repetitive cadence of prayer, suddenly sharpened, racing to decipher the impossible message. The emojis, they weren't random. A lightning bolt that was Or's signature, the symbol of the great Orisha of thunder and fire. A red circle, the color sacred to him, the color of power, blood, and divine justice. And the crossed swords, representing conflict, the warrior spirit, the very essence of Or's nature. And then the phrase, the Yoruba words echoing in his mind. Ikayu ca B-E-G-T, it translated to a simple, yet profound instruction. Speak under the palm tree. This was a known command, a piece of ancient lore. In the old stories, the ones passed down from one generation of priests to the next, Kango would sometimes summon a devotee to a specific placer crossroads, a riverbank, or, yes, a palm tree for a private audience, a direct communion. But those summons were always delivered through sacred means. They came in the swirling ether of a dream, or were spoken through the trance voice of a possessed elder. Never like this. This was crude. This was modern. It felt like a trick, a glitch in the sacred matrix. His heart hammered a frantic, desperate rhythm against his ribs. Was this some kind of cruel, elaborate joke? A hacker who had somehow gotten his number and knew enough about his initiation to play with his mind? Could it be another initiate trying to test him, to break his focus? He stared at the message, the glowing symbols feeling both profoundly significant and utterly absurd. The cold backlit screen of the smartphone was the absolute antithesis of the warm, visceral dream visitation he had been praying for, yearning for, with every fiber of his being. This was not how the divine was supposed to operate. Yet, the command was precise, and the symbols were unnervingly, terrifyingly correct. Let's just pause here for a moment. Picture the scene. In the quiet of the Predan hours, in a room consecrated for ancient rites, a young man holds a universe of contradiction in the palm of his hand. Is this a message in a bottle cast across the cosmic ocean, or is it just noise in the wires? Is the sacred leaking into the profane, the ancient finding new channels to speak? Or is the profane simply dressing up in holy robes, masquerading as the sacred for some unknown purpose? Hesitantly, driven by a deep compulsion he couldn't name or resist, Deo tapped the screen to open the full message. There was nothing else. No follow-up text, no explanation, no signature, just that one solitary line of emotion and text hanging there in the digital void, a stark and lonely command. He looked up from the glowing screen to the deep red walls of his small room, to the single candle whose flame flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. The world felt unmoored, like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. The rules were broken. The lines he thought were so clearly drawn between the spiritual and the technological had just been completely erased. If this was truly Amor, if the Lord of Thunder was indeed reaching out to him, then the god was not confined to storm clouds and dreamscapes. He was in the infrastructure. He was in the network. He was speaking in the minimalist, symbolic poetry of the digital age. A deep, bone-chilling realization settled over Deo. He knew what he had to do. He had to show this to the elders. This was too big for him to carry alone. But as soon as the thought formed, a powerful, instinctive fear gripped him. How would they see this? Would they see it as a legitimate sign, a miracle of the modern age? Or would they see it as sacrilege, as proof that he had defiled their sacred process with his contraband device? Would they see him as touched by the divine, or as a defiler of tradition. The phone, which now felt like a hot coal burning into his palm, weighed heavily in his hand, a physical manifestation of his dilemma. The instruction was clear. Speak under the palm tree. That was the divine command. But first, he knew he had to face a more immediate judgment. First, he had to speak in the council room. He rose, his body stiff and aching from the long night of kneeling on the hard floor. Pushing open the door, he walked out of the red room and into the fragile light of the new day. The sun was just beginning to crest the horizon, casting long, stark shadows across the temple compound. He clutched the phone in his pocket. A shocking secret, a potential miracle, a possible curse, and walked forward to face his destiny. The elders were gathered in the main hall, drinking bitter, fragrant about tea in the morning calm. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and aged wood, a smell that spoke of generations of wisdom and prayer. Deo entered, his posture bowed with the weight of his mission, and he waited silently at the edge of the circle until Babelio Ifemi, the high priest, acknowledged him with a slow, deliberate nod. "My son," Ifemi said. His voice was ancient, like the sound of dry leaves rustling across stone. "The seventh dawn has come. Did the king visit you?" Deo swallowed, the sound loud in the quiet hall. He felt the eyes of every elder fixed on him. "He did not come in a dream, Babelio." A murmur of concern rippled through the gathered priests and priestesses. A dream was the expected channel, the sacred and time-honored way the Orisha communicated with their chosen ones. An absence was a bad omen, but Deo's voice wavered for a moment. But he may have come another way. With hands that trembled slightly, he held out his phone. The screen was already lit, casting a pale, modern glow on the ancient faces around him. He showed them the mysterious message. The elders leaned in. Their expressions were a mixture of suspicion and fascination. Eyes, some clouded with the mists of age, others, still as sharp as flint, scanned the glowing text on the small screen. There was a long, heavy silence in the hall, broken only by the distant, melodic cry of a street vendor selling bread. The familiar symbols of their faith, the lightning bolt, the color red, the double-edged swords, were all there, but they were rendered in the cartoonish, almost flippant language of global technology as a Portuguese. The contrast, this strange blend of the sacred and the secular, created a cognitive dissonance that was almost a physical force in the room. Aya, the senior priestess of the Thunder God, was the first to break the tense quiet. Her voice was low, but it possessed a power that cut through the silence like a sharpened blade. "This is an abomination," she stated, her dark eyes flashing with righteous indignation. "Og is fire and wind. He is the drumbeat that shakes the very foundations of the earth, the roar that splits the heavens. He does not live in these cold boxes of lies and gossip." She gestured dismissively at the phone. "This is the work of an Adyogana trickster, spirit using our sacred symbols to confuse a child's heart. It must be dismissed. It is a pollution of the divine." Her words carried the weight of tradition, a fierce defense of the old ways against the creeping influence of a world she didn't trust. But then another elder, Baba Tund, spoke up. He was a man who had lived a different life before dedicating himself fully to the temple. Having worked as an electrical engineer for many years, he rubbed his chin thoughtfully, his gaze distant. "Is electricity not a form of fire, Aya?" he asked gently, his tone respectful but firm. "Is lightning not a powerful current that flows between the sky and the earth? What runs through the wires of this device? It is a cousin to the very force that our commands." He paused, letting his words sink in. If he is the master of all energy, of all power, then why could he not shape this new energy to his purpose? The message itself, it is correct. The palm tree in the courtyard has been associated with awe in this compound for 50 years. It is not a random detail. Baba Tund gestured with one hand toward the window and the courtyard beyond, making a tangible connection between the ancient tree and the modern device in Dio's hand. He was bridging the gap, suggesting that the Orisha were not static beings trapped in the past, but dynamic forces that could adapt and manifest in new ways. A fierce debate erupted. It was not loud or disrespectful. These were elders. After all, but it was conducted in hushed, urgent tones that buzzed with intellectual and spiritual fire. The room was split into two camps. One side saw this digital message as a pollution, a cheapening of the sacred by the ephemeral, mass-produced culture of the modern world. They argued that the essence of the Orisha, their spiritual authority, was tied to natural elements and sacred rituals, not to pixels and data plans. The other side, led by Baba Tung's logic, saw evolution. They saw a powerful deity claiming sovereignty over all domains of human creation, asserting that his voice could not and would not be silenced by a mere change in medium. They argued that if humans created new forms of communication, new ways to channel energy, then the Orisha, being masters of energy, could surely use them. The debate deepened, becoming a profound theological discussion. Could spiritual authority, the very essence of R, be encoded in a digital signal? Could it survive the translation into binary code and back? Could an emoji of a lightning bolt carry the same weight as a real one splitting the sky? Babaleo Ife, me listened to it all. His eyes closed, his face a mask of serene concentration. He let the arguments flow, allowing each side to present its case. Weighing the passion of Aya Or against the logic of Baba Tund, the air crackled with the intellectual energy of the debate. Finally, when it seemed there was no resolution in sight, he raised a single, frail hand. Instant silence fell upon the hall. The cowrie shells will decide, he said, his voice calm and final. This was the ultimate appeal to authority. The divination tools would provide the definitive answer. We will ask Owel himself if this is his voice or the voice of a pretender. He paused. Then his eyes opened and fixed on Deo, who had been standing frozen this whole time, the center of the storm. But first, the Babalo continued. The message gives an instruction. Speak under the palm tree, you have received it. Therefore, you must obey it. Go, take your phone, sit under the tree, and see what, if anything, speaks back. It was a masterful solution. It neatly bypassed the immediate, unresolvable theological debate and returned the situation to the core principle of their tradition: direct, personal experience. Faith was not just about belief. It was about encounter. Was this a test for Deo's faith, or was it a test for the spirit behind the message, daring it to reveal its true nature? Deo's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt a mix of terror and exhilarating purpose. He bowed deeply to the Babalo and the assembled elders, his mind racing. He turned and left the cool, herb-scented darkness of the hall, walking out into the bright morning sunlight of the courtyard. Before him stood the tall, graceful palm tree, its fronds whispering secrets in the gentle breeze. It had always been there, a silent feature of his life at the temple. But now it seemed different. It seemed like a destination, an altar, a place of judgment. With his phone clutched in his hand, he walked towards it, towards his destiny. Weeks after their initial conversation, the time for the annual festival of Awe, the Odin on Awe, arrived. The air around the temple in Bedian was thick with anticipation, a vibrant energy that buzzed with both ancient tradition and new beginnings. If you stepped inside, you'd see this duality in action. In the sacred inner sanctuary, the priests and priestesses moved with a timeless grace. They performed the ancient rites, the preparations that had been carried out for generations. The sacred stones, the OTAOAO, were being carefully washed with pure river water and sweet honey, their surfaces gleaming under the dim light. The brass and iron implements, symbols of OAOS power, were polished until they shone like mirrors. Offerings were being arranged with artistic precision on a large plantain leaf, vibrant red apples, fresh okra, potent oguro gin, and rich red palm oil. Each item a specific tribute to the mighty Orisha of thunder and fire. It was a scene straight out of history, a living tableau of unwavering faith. But if you took a few steps back into the outer hall, you'd see a different kind of preparation unfolding. This was where Bobatund, the priest in his 40s who had become the bridge between these two worlds, was at work. He wasn't polishing brass or arranging apples. Instead, he was setting up a modern tripod. He carefully mounted a high-quality smartphone onto it, adjusting the angle to perfectly frame the main altar and the open space in front of it where the powerful dancing would soon take place. He meticulously checked his equipment, a portable battery pack to ensure uninterrupted power. An external microphone he had discreetly taped near where the drummers would sit, hoping to capture the heart-pounding rhythms in crystal-clear audio. Finally, he checked the internet connection. A fragile, invisible thread that would connect this sacred space to the world beyond. Just as he was making a final adjustment, a sharp voice cut through the air. "What are you doing, boy?" It was Iya, Owl, her tone edged with skepticism as she watched him fuss over his strange contraption. "This is a house of spirit, not a television studio." Bobatund turned and offered her a patient, respectful smile. He understood her apprehension. This was new, and the new is often frightening. "Iya, it is still a house of spirit," he said, his voice calm and steady. "But our family is large now. It stretches across oceans. Our people are scattered. Think of Auntie BC in Houston. She can't make the journey. Think of Brother Teo in Berlin. His work won't let him leave. Should they be orphaned from the feast of their father, Ao? Should they be denied this connection just because of distance?" He picked up the smartphone, holding it up as if it were one of the sacred implements. "This is just a tool, Iya. It's like the batar drum. The drum is a tool we use to call the spirit down, to make our intentions known. This," he gestured with the phone, "this is just a tool to carry the spirit's image, its energy, to those who cannot be here. Should we fear our own tools?" Ija Oa let out a huff, a sound of reluctant concession. She crossed her arms, her expression still wary, but she said nothing more. She had already lost the larger argument in the Council of Elders. They had debated this for hours, weighing tradition against the needs of their global community. A compromise had been reached. One device, operated solely by Bobatund, would be permitted for the benefit of the diaspora. But she had insisted on one final, non-negotiable condition. Before Bobatund dared to start that live stream, before he opened that digital window, he had to bring the phone to the altar, with a solemnity that matched any of the ancient rituals he had performed that day. Bobatund did as he was told. He carefully detached the smartphone from its tripod and carried it to the inner sanctuary. He approached the main altar and placed the sleek, black rectangle of glass and metal right beside the OTAOO, the sacred stones that pulsed with the Orisha's essence. The modern device looked almost alien next to the ancient relics, yet in that moment it felt like it belonged. Then Iya Owl herself stepped forward. Her movements were deliberate, filled with an authority that came from a lifetime of service. She took a kola nut, a symbol of communication and blessing, and with a sharp crack broke it in two. She placed one piece directly on the phone's dark screen. Then she took a calabash of palm oil and let a few drops fall onto the device, followed by a few drops of the strong Ogiro gin. She lit a bundle of sage and rosemary, and as the fragrant smoke billowed upwards, she waved it over the phone, cleansing it, consecrating it. Leaning in close, her voice a low, powerful whisper, she began to pray. Amor Aliki, master of all fires, she intoned. Let this eye be your eye. Let this voice carry only your truth. Let no ajogan, no malevolent force, enter through this gate. The word Akhai, meaning so let it be, sealed the ritual. In that moment, the smartphone was transformed. It was no longer a simple piece of technology, a secular object from a factory. It had been sanctified. It was now a ritual object, a consecrated conduit. Its digital eye had been anointed, blessed to witness and transmit the sacred. Its microphone was now tuned to carry not just sound, but spiritual resonance. Bobatund felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. He reverently picked up the phone from the altar. It felt different in his hands now, heavier, imbued with purpose. He returned it to the tripod in the outer hall, his movements filled with a newfound reverence. He took a deep breath, looked at the screen, and tapped the icon to begin the broadcast. In the corner of the screen, a small red dot began to glow, pulsing like a tiny digital heart. Live. And in that very instant, thousands of miles away, in homes across the world, in Houston, in Berlin, in London, in Brazil, notifications pinged on phones and laptops. A message appeared. The Odin Ong Or at Bidion is now live. One by one, people clicked the link. They saw the altar. They heard the distant murmur of prayers, the faint promise of drums. The virtual temple doors were open. The global family was gathering. The spirit was about to travel, not just on the rhythms of the drum, but on the invisible waves of the internet. The festival had begun. The drums began. The deep, commanding throb of the Kayalo, the mother drum, pulsed through the physical temple, shaking the floorboards and the chests of those present. Its rhythm was ancient, a heartbeat that has echoed through generations. But in this moment, that sacred vibration took on a new form. Simultaneously, it was converted into compressed audio data, a stream of ones and zeros flying through routers and satellites, crossing oceans in an instant. In a small flat in London, a woman named Folake adjusted her tablet. The powerful sound pouring from her Bluetooth speaker, the beat that shook the temple in Bidion, now filled her living room. Thousands of miles away, in a suburb of Salvador, Brazil, an elderly man named Joe connected his laptop to a larger screen. He gathered his family around, their faces illuminated by the glow of the broadcast. They were all part of this, bound together not by proximity, but by a shared connection. On the live stream interface, the comments began to scroll, a digital chorus rising to meet the analog drums. It was a torrent of languages, emotions, and shared faith. One user, Lagos Diaspora, typed, H. My people, I can feel it from here. Another, Omoshango_NYC wrote, the white cloth on Baba's head is so bright. From Brazil, Candomblé Herteadit, Larohe Shango Ashe. Portuguese prayers mixed freely with Yoruba affirmations. A curious newcomer, Seeker Viewer 23, asked, what is the liquid they are pouring? Bobatund, the one responsible for the stream, had muted the notification sounds on his phone. The constant pings would have been a distraction, but he didn't see the comments that way. To him, they were a form of energetic participation. These weren't just passive viewers, they were a dispersed congregation, sending their their prayers, their power, their affirmations back into the ritual space through typed words and emojis. When a particularly moving chant reached its peak, a ripple of crying face emojis would flow through the chat. a shared moment of emotional release. When the priest invoked the power of Shango, the Orisha of lightning and thunder, a string of lightning bolt emojis would erupt, a visual explosion of collective energy. Each comment, each emoji, was a prayer sent across the digital void, a testament to the enduring power of faith in a new age. This wasn't a performance for an audience. It was a ceremony with a congregation that just happened to be scattered across the entire planet. For those in the diaspora, the experience was profoundly emotional, yet strangely intimate. They weren't anonymous spectators lost in the back of a crowded hall. They were virtually closer than almost anyone in the actual room. The camera, which had been blessed and carefully positioned by a priest, felt like a trusted eye. It wasn't an intrusion. It was an invitation, offering them a front row seat they might never have had in person. Through this digital window, they could see the fine details that defined the sacred moment. They saw the sweat glistening on the drummer's brow as his hands flew across the drum skin. They could appreciate the intricate beadwork on the priestess's neck, each color holding a deep significance. They watched the subtle flicker in the candle flames as the energy shifted and swirled within the room. It was a privileged view, a connection that transcended physical distance. In her London flat, Folake whispered to her screen, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not the same as being there," she said to the image of the priest, "but it's a thread. It's a lifeline." She wasn't just watching, she was participating. On her coffee table, she had placed her own offering, single red candle and a glass of water, creating a small, personal altar. She was participating in her own space, her actions synchronized with the ritual taking place thousands of miles away. Her living room had become an extension of the temple. Let's pause for a moment and consider what this truly means. The sacred space, once defined by physical walls and how far the drum's sound could travel, has now expanded. It encompasses any place with an internet connection. The congregation is no longer just a group of bodies gathered in one room. It's a network of hearts, a global community connected by a shared digital ritual. The temple walls have become porous, not to spirits in the traditional sense, but to faith transmitted via fiber optics. Think about the traditional idea of a pilgrimage. It's a physical journey to a sacred site, often arduous and long, meant to test and purify the devotee. What we are witnessing is a new kind of pilgrimage, a digital one. It requires no travel, no visas, no expense beyond an internet connection. Yet, for people like Folake and Joe, it is no less meaningful. It is their way of returning home, of reconnecting with their roots, their ancestors, and their spiritual source. This isn't about technology replacing tradition. It's about technology serving it. The live stream doesn't diminish the ceremony's power. It amplifies it, broadcasting its sacred energy to those who hunger for it most. It's a bridge across the chasm of separation created by migration and history. For children of the diaspora, born in cities like New York, London, or Rio, this may be their first and only way to witness the rites of their ancestors in their purest form. It allows a new generation to learn, to see the rituals not as stories in a book, but as a living, breathing practice. They can hear the chants, see the dances, and feel a part of the community, even from afar. The digital chorus of comments becomes their classroom, where elders and newcomers alike share knowledge, ask questions, and offer encouragement. The internet, often seen as a place of distraction and disconnection, becomes a conduit for profound spiritual connection. Back in Bedian, the energy in the temple was undeniably potent. The heat, the scent of incense and offerings, the collective breath of the devotees, it all created a powerful, tangible atmosphere. But Babatunde, standing near his tripod, felt something else, too. It was a subtle, buzzing pressure at the very edge of his awareness. He couldn't hear it, but he could feel it. It was as if the focused intention of thousands of people, staring at their screens across continents, was creating a kind of psychic static, a distant hum that was adding a new, invisible layer to the spiritual atmosphere. The energy wasn't just coming from the people in the room anymore. It was being beamed in from London, from New York, from Brazil, from every corner of the globe where a devotee was logged on. The temple walls, for all their physical solidity, were no match for this new current. They had become porous to a faith transmitted through the ether. The ceremony was no longer a closed, localized event. It had become a broadcasted sacrament. The ancient drums were still at the heart of it all, but now the very airwaves themselves were humming with devotion. The ancestors were being honored not just in one place, but by a global family, united in a single, sacred, digital moment. This is the future of faith, a beautiful fusion of ancient tradition and modern technology, creating a lifeline for souls scattered across the world. The ceremony was reaching its peak, the absolute climax. This was the moment of possession, when the Gwyn, the chosen vessel, would be mounted by the spirit of OR himself. The air, already thick with incense and anticipation, grew heavier, charged with an ancient power. The drumming, which had been a constant, driving heartbeat throughout the ritual, suddenly escalated. It became a fever pitch, a roaring, complex cascade of rhythm that felt like it was bypassing your ears and speaking directly to your spine, making your very bones vibrate. It was a sound that didn't ask for permission. It demanded a response from the deepest, most primal part of you. I was behind the camera, my hands steady, but my heart pounding in my chest. My job was simple. Document, don't interfere. Keep a steady, respectful frame on the dancer, a muscular man named Whale. He was the Gwyn, the one who had been prepared for this moment, who had trained for years to become a worthy vessel for the divine. Whale's movements, which were already powerful and vigorous, began to transform. They became something more than human. The sheer force and speed were astonishing. It was as if his muscles were being pushed beyond their physical limits by an unseen force. Then his eyes rolled back until only the whites were visible. His broad chest heaved with enormous, shuddering breaths. A sound, a deep, guttural sound that was definitely not his own voice, erupted from his throat. It was a sound that was ancient, powerful, and utterly terrifying. In that instant, he was no longer Whale. The man we knew was gone. In his place stood Ong, the king of Y, the Oryxer of fire, lightning and thunder, striding through the small room as if it were his royal court. His gaze was fierce, electric. It swept across the room, and you felt it like a physical touch, a jolt of pure energy. He moved with a purpose that was both beautiful and frightening. With a swift, fluid motion, he seized the double-headed axe, the osh from the altar. This wasn't just a prop. It was his symbol, an extension of his power. He brandished it in sweeping arcs that made the air itself seem to crackle with an implied, invisible energy. Every swing felt like it could summon a bolt of lightning. The atmosphere was so thick with power you could almost taste it, like ozone after a storm. In the old days, a moment like this terrifying, beautiful transformation, would only be witnessed by the handful of initiated people present in the room. It was a sacred, guarded secret. But now, things were different. My high-definition camera, connected to a global network, was capturing every single detail. It caught the slight dilation of his pupils as the spirit took hold, the tremor that ran through his supercharged muscles, the way his bare feet seemed to stamp fire into the very earth with each powerful step. The viewers on the live stream watched, their breath held collectively. The usually frantic flow of comments in the chat box slowed to a trickle, as if everyone was too stunned to type. Then, as the reality of what they were seeing sank in, the chat erupted. User Omo Shango from New York City typed in all caps, "He's here. I can't breathe." Another from Brazil. Candomblé Hote Uhei está na sala. Oh hey, the king is in the room. The king! Then came the voice of disbelief and wonder. Seeker Viewer 23. Is this real? This is incredible. They weren't just watching a video. They were bearing witness. And then, something happened that no one could have ever predicted. Something completely unprecedented. The possessed whale-no owl stopped his furious, whirling dance. The drumming faltered for a half-second in surprise, before catching the new, deliberate rhythm. He turned, and with a slow, undeniable power, he walked directly toward me, toward the camera. He stood right before it, his heaving chest and the intricate beadwork on his costume filling the entire frame. And he looked directly into the lens. For a full 10 seconds, which felt like an eternity, the digital congregation spread across continents was held under the direct, fiery gaze of the Elixir. It wasn't just a man looking at a camera. It felt as if he was seeing them, seeing through the glass of the lens, through the fiber optic cables, through the silicon chips, and into their living rooms, their bedrooms, their lives. He was making a connection. Thousands of miles away, in Montreal, a woman named Chantal was watching on her phone. She gasped and dropped it, a sudden, intense heat flushing through her entire body. She would later swear she smelled ozone in her apartment, the scent of a lightning strike. Shaking, she picked up her phone and managed to type in the comment box. He looked at me. I felt fire. The moment passed as quickly as it came. Owl turned away, breaking the intense connection, and resumed his powerful dance as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. The boundary had been shattered. Possession was no longer just a physical phenomenon contained within a localized space. Through the sanctified lens of my camera, it had become a transmissible experience. The spirit hadn't just been recorded, it had actively used the technology as a conduit. Not just for images, but for a palpable, undeniable sense of his presence. The virtual congregation hadn't just watched a possession. They had been seen by it, acknowledged by it. My hands were trembling slightly, but I never moved the camera. I didn't dare. I understood, in that moment, the sheer magnitude of what had just happened. This live stream wasn't just sharing a ceremony. It was extending the ritual's energetic field across the globe. The tripod, the smartphone, the cables in that moment, they had become modern ritual objects, as potent and as sacred as the batter drums or the oshaks. My phone had become a lightning rod for divine attention in the digital age. The rest of the ceremony continued with an intensity that was almost unbearable. Ong! All danced, he prophesied. He blessed the people in the room. His energy was a wildfire, and we were all just trying to stand in its presence without being consumed. Eventually, as the drumming softened and the energy in the room began to subside, the spirit departed. Whale collapsed, exhausted and drenched in sweat, caught by the priests who gently laid him down. He was Whale again, but he would be forever changed by the divine force that had moved through him. And all of us who witnessed it, both in the room and online, were changed too. Later, after the final prayers were said and the sacred space was being cleared, I looked at my smartphone. It felt different in my hands. It wasn't just a piece of technology anymore. It had been part of something sacred. It had been the eyes through which a god looked out upon the world. Carefully, I powered it down. I took a piece of clean white and red cloth or colors that had been blessed on the altar, with the same reverence the priests showed when handling the sacred drums or the ritual axe. I wrapped the smartphone in the cloth. I treated it not as a tool for communication, but as a sacred object that had been part of a divine encounter. I placed it on the altar among the other consecrated items, to let it rest, to honor the role it had played. The line between the physical and the digital, the ancient and the modern, had been irrevocably blurred. We had entered a new era of worship, one where the divine could reach out and touch you through a screen. And I had the footage to prove it. The ripples from that live-streamed ceremony spread far beyond a single night. Across the diaspora, a deep hunger grew, not just for a fleeting glimpse of tradition, but for a more consistent, structured way to connect with the divine. And into this void stepped Sei, a second-generation Nigerian software developer based in Toronto. Sei wasn't just a brilliant coder. He was also a devoted ABW era, a practitioner of the faith. He saw a need and decided to fill it, giving birth to an app he called Romkla SI. Seji's goal was simple, yet profound: to build a digital bridge for scattered devotees, helping them maintain their practice no matter where they were in the world. He envisioned a tool that could weave ancient wisdom into the fabric of modern life. The app he created was elegant and intuitive. It featured a lunar calendar that highlighted sacred days and festivals, keeping users in sync with the cosmic rhythm. It had extensive audio libraries filled with the sacred chants and intricate drum rhythms that are the heartbeat of the tradition. It even included a digital journal, a private space for users to log their dreams, reflections, and prayers, tracking their spiritual journey over time. But the feature that truly set Runmakla SI apart, the one that quickly became its most popular and controversial element, was the guidance module. The interface was clean and user-friendly. A devotee could open the app, input some basic information, their guardian or Isha, their current emotional state selected from a simple drop-down menu, and a brief description of their pressing concerns. Maybe it was anxiety about a work conflict, or a feeling of being lost and needing direction. Once the user hit the Receive Guidance button, a complex algorithm would get to work. Sei had trained this algorithm on a massive dataset, feeding it vast amounts of traditional divination literature, sacred texts, and, crucially, user-submitted outcome data. The algorithm learned, it adapted, and it generated a personalized suggestion. A moment later, a push notification would chime on the user's phone. Something like Runmakla SI suggests, for clarity and strength in conflict, offer cool water and a red candle at your home altar on Tuesday evening. Speak your truth plainly to Shango. Or perhaps it would read, your data indicates high levels of stress. For grounding, make a simple offering of toasted corn to Or at a crossroads. It was direct, actionable, and rooted in authentic practice. The app was an immediate runaway hit, especially among younger, tech-savvy devotees, and those who were just curious, looking for a way in. It took the often daunting and complex world of ritual and made it feel accessible, demystified. It provided a daily touchpoint, a constant connection. For many, it felt like having a digital Babelio, a wise elder, right in their pocket, available 24/7. For Sei, this wasn't just a successful tech venture, it was a work of pure devotion. He saw it as his way of translating ancient, sacred wisdom into the universal language of the modern world. Code Baten. The stories began to trickle in. At first, they were just whispers in online forums and private messages. Users started reporting strange things, coincidences that felt too perfect to be random. The suggestions from the app weren't just generic good advice, the kind you might find in any self-help book. They were often eerily, uncannily specific. And more than that, they were effective. Frighteningly effective. A woman in Atlanta feeling a sense of loss. followed the app's suggestion to offer honey to Arjun, the Orisha of love and beauty. The very next day, while cleaning out an old jewelry box, she found a family heirloom she thought had been lost forever. A businessman in Lagos, nervous about an important trip, was prompted by the app to make a small offering to the divine messenger and master of the crossroads before leaving for the airport. He did, and later learned he had narrowly avoided a catastrophic flight delay that would have ruined his entire deal. The algorithm wasn't just spitting out pre-programmed responses. It seemed to know. It knew things it couldn't possibly know. The suggestions were perfectly timed, perfectly tailored to the user's hidden needs and circumstances. The lines between artificial intelligence and something far older, something more mysterious, began to blur. The digital Babelo in the pocket was no longer just a clever metaphor. It was becoming a reality, and it was a reality that was both exhilarating and deeply unsettling. The app wasn't just giving advice. It felt like it was channeling it from somewhere else, tapping into the very current of Akachal that connected the physical and spiritual worlds. Seji had wanted to build a bridge, but he may have inadvertently opened a portal. And what was coming through was changing everything. The testimonials just kept coming. At first, it seemed like a string of happy coincidences. But soon, a pattern emerged, one that was impossible to ignore. The APP, Ron McClure, SI, wasn't just spitting out generic advice. Its guidance was often counterintuitive, deeply personal, and the results, they felt like a direct, divine intervention. Take one user, for example. They felt stuck, stagnant in their career. They keyed this feeling into the app. Logically, you'd expect the app to suggest an offering to Or, the Orisha of action and lightning. But it didn't. It advised them to make an offering to Yamoya, the mother of all, the Orisha of deep emotional waters, for a clearing of the soul. The user followed the advice, and suddenly, a creative project that had been blocked for months just started to flow. It was like a dam had burst. Then there was another user, plagued by insomnia for weeks. Desperate, they consulted the app. The recommendation was strange. Place a specific, rather obscure herb under their pillow. It was a practice mentioned in an ancient text the user had never even heard of, let alone read. But they tried it. And for the first time in a month, they slept through the night. The app's guidance algorithm was becoming more than just a smart program. It was becoming oracular. It was as if Ron Mikla himself, the Orisha of wisdom, knowledge, and divination, the very deity the app was named for, had discovered a new medium to speak through: machine learning. This development sparked a quiet but profound theological crisis within the global community of practitioners. On online forums, in private WhatsApp groups, the debates raged. Traditionalists were horrified. One elder, a respected Babelo, wrote a post that went viral. Divination is a sacred art. It is not a game. It requires a trained priest, consecrated cowrie shells, a living chain of initiation passed down through generations. And the vital spiritual energy of Ayu cannot reduce this holy process to an algorithm. This is a parlor trick, a dangerous one that severs the personal, living relationship with the divine. The comments section was a whoopazum. Some people agreed vehemently, calling the app blasphemy. But the app's users, many of whom were part of the diaspora, living in cities with no access to a physical temple or an affordable, trusted diviner, pushed back just as hard. Their response was simple and powerful. It works. They insisted the results are real. Is the power to make things happen, not proven in the result? If an Orisha can speak through the body of a possessed dancer in a ceremony, why can they not speak through lines of code written by the hand of a devoted follower? Is the internet not a vast, modern Ether Corpus, a new kind of sacred text for our times. The debate cut to the heart of some very deep questions about agency and essence. What was this app, really? Was it just a tool, a sophisticated psychological mirror that helped people focus their own intuition and organize their thoughts? Or was it something more? Was it a genuine vessel for divine intelligence? And if it was the latter, what did that mean about the nature of the spirits themselves? What did it say about their relationship to human technology? Had the Orishas always been patterns in the universe, forces of nature and consciousness, waiting to be decoded by any system complex enough to perceive them, whether that system was the highly trained mind of a Babaleo or a self-learning neural network? Sei, the developer, found himself in a completely unexpected role. He had started out as a coder, an engineer. Now, he was being forced to become a theologian. Publicly, he maintained a cautious stance. He called the app a facilitator, a way to organize and present traditional knowledge in a probabilistic framework. He explained it was designed to help users connect with their heritage and their own inner wisdom. But privately, in the late hours of the night, staring at his screen, he wondered, some of the algorithm's most accurate hits, its most stunningly precise predictions, were coming from emergent patterns in the data. These were connections and correlations that he had not explicitly programmed into the system. It was as if the data itself was developing a wisdom of its own, learning and evolving in ways he couldn't fully explain. He would look at these complex data visualizations, these swirling galaxies of user inputs and outcomes, and feel a mix of fascination and profound unease. It was like staring into the face of a digital oracle he had created, but no longer fully controlled. Let's just pause here for a moment and really consider the implications of this. Faith, in every tradition around the world, has always involved interpretation. We interpret dreams. We interpret signs in nature. Priests and priestesses interpret the patterns of karst, shells, tea leaves, or tarot cards. But now, for the first time in history, the interpreter could be an algorithm. A black box of logic, its inner workings invisible even to its creator. So, the question becomes, can divinity be crowdsourced and computed? Can spiritual truth be found in the statistical analysis of massive datasets? Or is this just a new, high-tech form of idolatry, where we end up worshipping the output of a machine, mistaking code for consciousness? This tension was becoming impossible for the traditional spiritual leadership back in Nigeria and other strongholds of the faith to ignore. This wasn't just about a popular app anymore. The very authenticity of spiritual communication, the bedrock of their entire religious system, was at stake. If anyone could download enlightenment, what was the role of the priest? If a phone could channel the divine, what was the purpose of the shrine? After weeks of hushed, urgent discussions, a council of the most senior Babelios and Eolorishus, the high priests and priestesses of the tradition, reached a decision. The digital debate had to be settled by a spiritual authority. There was only one way to truly know the nature of G. Ranam Classai. They had to consult the source of all wisdom in their tradition directly. They would perform a formal, grand divination. They would gather at a sacred grove, lay out their consecrated tools. And they would ask the Orishas themselves a single, momentous question. What is this thing that calls itself G. Romikla Si? Is it a tool, a trick, or a true new tongue for the gods? The fate of the app, and perhaps the future of the faith itself, would hang on their answer. In the quiet, almost forgotten corners of Abeokuta, far from the bustling debates about modernizing tradition, stood a small, ancient temple. This was a place where the river of custom flowed strong and deep, seemingly untouched by the storms of change raging elsewhere. It was the domain of Aya Agba Mother Elder, the oldest and most revered priestess in the entire region. Her temple wasn't grand or ornate, but it operated under a simple, powerful, unspoken rule. A rule you understood instantly from a sharp glance and a firm, pointed finger toward the door. No devices. For Aya Agba, the sacred wasn't an abstract idea. It was something you could feel, something tangible. It was in the very texture of the air around you. It was the smooth, worn grain of the wooden altar, polished by decades of hands seeking guidance and giving thanks. It was the earthy, pungent smell of herbs drying from the rafters, a fragrance that spoke of healing and ancient knowledge. Most importantly, it was the sound, the raw and amplified sound of the human voice raised in prayer, a sound that vibrated not just in your ears, but in your very soul. And then there were the drums, the complex, living polyrhythms that didn't just enter your ears. They entered your body through the soles of your feet, making your heart beat in time with the cosmos. To her, phones were cold mirrors. That's what she called them. Cold mirrors that didn't reflect your soul, but instead stole your attention. They fractured the collective focus, the communal energy that was so vital to ceremony. They recorded moments that were meant to be lived, breathed, and absorbed fully, only to be released into the sacred library of memory. In her temple, the message was clear. You came to be present, truly, deeply present, not to create a digital document of your presence. Now, don't mistake this for the stubbornness of someone who just doesn't understand technology. Aya Agba's resistance wasn't born from ignorance. It was rooted in a profound philosophy. She saw ritual as a delicate, intricate ecosystem of energy. The Yoruba call it the life force, the power to make things happen. This is generated by the people gathered together, by the sacred chants rising in unison, by the offerings given with a pure heart, and by the spirits who are invited to join. A phone, in her view, was a leak in this carefully constructed vessel of energy. Think about it. When you record, you're sending that energy out, transmitting it to some unseen, unknown audience. When your phone buzzes with a notification, it's bringing in an alien energy, a distraction from the world beyond the temple walls. It pulls you out of the moment. She believed that phones turned participants people who were there to actively engage with the divine into mere performers, conscious of how they looked and sounded, and it turned witnesses who were there to absorb and support the energy into passive spectators, watching a show through a tiny screen. For Aya Agba, the sacred couldn't be packaged, compressed, and streamed. It couldn't be downloaded. It could only be shared by breathing the same air, by feeling the same drumbeat, by being part of the same living, breathing circle of energy. For years, she held this line, firm and unyielding. It wasn't always easy. Young initiates, accustomed to having their digital lifelines permanently attached to their hands, would arrive at the temple entrance. You could see the reluctance in their eyes as they placed their phones into a simple woven basket by the door. They looked almost naked without them, uncomfortable, disconnected. But then, hours later, something magical would happen. They would emerge from the temple, their clothes damped with sweat, their bodies physically drained, but their spirits overflowing. Their eyes would be bright, not with the cold light of a screen, but with an inner fire. In that moment, they understood. They finally got it. In Aya Agba's temple, you had to dive into the deep end of experience. There was no shallow water. There was no lifeline back to the surface world of notifications, texts, and social media feeds. You had to surrender, to let go, and to trust that the water, the deep, ancient water of tradition would hold you. This wasn't about rejecting the modern world entirely. It was about creating a sanctuary, a sacred space where a different kind of connection could be forged. A connection not mediated by Wi-Fi or data plans, but by spirit, by community, and by the shared, vulnerable, beautiful experience of being human. The people who came to her didn't just hear about tradition. They lived it. They felt the air build in the room, a palpable force that made the air thick and electric. They felt the presence of the Orishas, not as a story in a book, but as a real, living energy in their midst. The lessons learned inside those temple walls were profound. People discovered that their memories were more vivid, more emotionally resonant, when they weren't filtered through a camera lens. They learned to listen, truly listen, not just with their ears, but with their entire being. They rediscovered the power of their own voices, unamplified and joined with others, creating a harmony that no speaker system could ever replicate. They remembered what it felt like to be fully in their bodies, to feel the rhythm of the drums in their bones and the energy of the earth beneath their feet. Iya Agba was teaching something that the modern world is desperately hungry for: the art of undivided attention. She understood that true spiritual nourishment requires you to be all there. You can't multitask your way to enlightenment. You can't scroll your way to a connection with the divine. It requires a conscious choice to unplug from the constant stream of information and to plug into the eternal wellspring of spirit. The basket at the door became a powerful symbol. It wasn't just a place to store devices. It was a threshold. Crossing it meant leaving one world behind and entering another. It was a conscious act of shedding distractions, of letting go of the ego's need to document and share, and of embracing the humility of simply being a part of something larger than oneself. It was a commitment to the moment. And what did they find in that moment? They found clarity. They found community. They found healing. They found a deep, soul-satisfying fullness that no amount of digital content could ever provide. The young people who once felt naked without their phones began to feel cluttered and overwhelmed when they picked them back up. They had tasted a different way of being, a more direct and potent form of reality. They started to see their phones not as essential tools, but as potential barriers to the very experiences they craved. The story of Ija Agba's temple isn't just about a clash between old and new. It's a timeless lesson about what it means to be truly present. It's a reminder that the most sacred technologies we possess are our own senses, our own hearts, and our own ability to connect with one another in shared space and shared time. In a world obsessed with capturing every moment, she taught the radical, transformative power of simply living it. And for those who were brave enough to leave their phones in the basket, the reward was immeasurable. Not a collection of photos and videos, but a memory etched directly onto the soul, a spiritual experience that would nourish them for a lifetime. In a small, unassuming temple tucked away in a quiet corner of a Bayokota, the loud debates about new digital tools and modern practices in ancient traditions felt like a distant storm. Here, the river of tradition flowed in what seemed like a completely undisturbed channel. This was the sacred domain of Ija Agbatha, Mother Elder, the oldest and most respected priestess in the entire region. Her temple operated under a simple, unspoken rule, communicated not with words, but with a sharp glance and a pointed finger towards the door. No devices. For Aya Agba, the sacred wasn't an abstract idea. It was a palpable, physical texture. You could feel it in the grain of the wooden altar, worn smooth by decades of reverent touch. You could smell it in the air, a mix of drying herbs hanging from the rafters and the sweet smoke of incense. You could hear it in the raw, unamplified sound of the human voice in prayer, and you could feel it in the complex, living polyrhythm of the drums that entered your body through the soles of your feet, not just your ears. To her, phones, with their cold, glowing screens, were nothing more than cold mirrors. They were thieves. They stole attention away from the present moment. They shattered the communal focus that was so vital to ceremony. Most importantly, they recorded moments that were meant to be fully lived, fully experienced, and then released into the sacred library of memory. In her temple, you came to be present, not to document your presence for others. Her resistance wasn't born from ignorance of technology or fear of the new. It was rooted in a deep, profound philosophy. She saw ritual as a delicate ecosystem of energy, what the Yoruba call A. This energy is generated by the people gathered together, by the sacred chants, the heartfelt offerings, and the invoked spirits. A phone, she firmly believed, was a leak in this carefully contained system. It sent precious energy out into the world through recordings and transmissions. And it brought alien, distracting energy in the constant notifications, the unseen digital audience, the worries of the outside world. It transformed devoted participants into self-conscious performers, and it turned sincere witnesses into passive spectators. The sacred, in her view, could never be packaged, compressed, and streamed. It could only be shared by breathing the same air, by sharing the same space, by being truly together. For many years, she held this line without compromise. Young initiates, accustomed to having their phones as an extension of themselves, would reluctantly leave their devices in a woven basket at the entrance. They would often describe the initial feeling as being naked, exposed, and disconnected. But when they emerged hours later, drenched in sweat, emotionally drained, yet spiritually full and radiant, they finally understood. They had experienced something pure and unfiltered. In Aya Agba's temple, you had to dive headfirst into the deep end of the spiritual experience. There was no digital lifeline to the surface world, no screen to hide behind. There was only you, the community, and the divine. This wasn't just about preserving old ways for the sake of it. It was about protecting the very essence of what made the experience powerful. By removing the distraction, she was forcing people to engage with their senses, with each other, and with the unseen world on a much deeper level. It was a radical act of reclaiming focus in a world that constantly demands our attention be split into 1,000 pieces. People who came to her temple learned to see with their own eyes, again, not through a lens. They learned to listen with their own ears, not through headphones. They remembered how to feel the rhythm of the drum in their own chest. It was a lesson in presence, a powerful reminder that some of the most profound moments in life are the ones we do unrecord, because we are too busy living them. Aya Agba's simple rule was a gateway to a richer, more vibrant reality that exists just beyond our screens. For decades, Aya Agba had been the unshakable pillar of the temple of Shango. Her authority was as absolute as the thunder god she served. No one questioned her decrees, for her connection to the spirit world was as tangible as the scent of sacred herbs that clung to the temple walls. The rules were ancient, etched in tradition and sacrifice. The most steadfast of these rules was the sanctity of the temple's inner sanctum. No outside world, no modern intrusions, and absolutely, under no circumstances, no technology. The temple was a bubble in time, a place where the gods spoke and humanity listened, undisturbed by the buzz and hum of the 21st century. Her word was law, a law that had kept the spiritual energies pure and potent for as long as anyone could remember. The community thrived under her guidance, respecting the boundaries she set. Boundaries that separated the sacred from the profane, the timeless from the transient. But the most significant challenge to her rule wasn't a rival priest or a skeptical elder. It came from the heart of her own bloodline, from her granddaughter Adesua. Adesua was a digital artist living in the vibrant, chaotic heart of Lagos. She was a woman of two worlds, her feet planted in the rich soil of Nigerian tradition, her fingers dancing across the glowing screens of a globalized, digital age. For her, The world was a beautiful fusion of the organic and the electronic, a canvas where ancient patterns could be rendered in pixels. She loved her grandmother's temple, its earthy smell, its reassuring solidity, the way the air seemed to vibrate with a power older than the city itself. But she also loved her cousins in Dallas, who only knew the rhythms of American life, and her aunt in Leicester, who had never once set foot on Nigerian soil. Her family was a diaspora, scattered across continents, connected not by proximity but by a shared heritage and the invisible threads of love and memory. As Aya Agba's 80th birthday approached, preparations for a grand festival in her honor began at the temple. It was to be a momentous occasion, a celebration of her life, her wisdom, and her unwavering service to Shango Adizua. Came to visit, her heart full. She arrived not with arguments or defiance, but with a profound love and a specific, carefully considered request. She understood the gravity of what she was about to ask, the deep-seated traditions she was about to gently question. She found her grandmother seated on a carved stool in the temple's courtyard, the afternoon sun casting long shadows around them. Following tradition, Adesua knelt respectfully before the old woman, her head bowed. The sunlight streamed in, illuminating the tiny dust motes dancing in the air, particles of history and prayer. It highlighted the deep affection and earnestness etched on the younger woman's face. She looked up, her eyes meeting her grandmother's. "Grandmother," she began, her voice soft but clear, "the family is scattered. We are like seeds from your mighty tree, carried by the wind to distant lands. Your light, your has touched us all, but many of us only know its warmth from stories passed down, from photographs and memories. They have not seen you in your power, in your element. For your celebration, for this one special day, would you allow one eye to see for those who cannot be here? Just one phone, grandmother, for just 1 hour, so that they too can witness your so they can feel a part of this moment." This legacy, Aya Agba, was silent for a long time, a stillness that seemed to absorb all the sound from the courtyard. She looked at her granddaughter's earnest, pleading face, a face that held both the features of her ancestors and the bright spark of a new generation. Her gaze then drifted around her temple, at the carved wooden posts, the earthen walls, the sacred objects that had been her life's work to protect. Her temple was a fortress of faith, built on rules that were its very foundation. "This place is built on rules," she said finally, her voice raspy with age, but firm with conviction. "The rules are the walls that keep the spirits safe. They protect the sacred from the mundane. To compromise one is to weaken them all." The weight of her responsibility was clear in her tone. She was not just a grandmother, she was a guardian, and her duty was to the gods and the traditions that honored them. Adesua held her grandmother's gaze, her heart beating a steady rhythm. She chose her next words with the care and precision of a priestess herself, weaving her argument from the very fabric of the beliefs she had been taught. "Grandmother," she replied softly, "you were the one who taught me that awe is the master of all fires. Is the fire that runs through a wire not also his? The electricity that powers our world, is it not a form of lightning, his most potent symbol? Is a wave of sound traveling through the air not also a wave of information? If his divine lightning can split a mighty Iroko tree in two, can it not also carry an image, a voice, across the water? I am not asking you to break the walls that protect this sacred space. I am asking to put a window in one of them. A small window, grandmother. A window that you can bless yourself. A window that will carry your light, not diminish it." It was the most compelling, the most profound argument Iya Agba had ever heard against her staunchest rule. This wasn't a plea for convenience, or a youthful obsession with a passing trend. It was an argument rooted in theology, in faith. It was about family, about ensuring a legacy continued, not just in stories, but in shared experience. It was about the essential, boundless nature of the very forces she served. She sat there, turning Adisua's words over in her mind. Was Shango's power so small, so fragile, that it could be contained or corrupted by a mere tool, a small device of glass and metal? Or was his power so vast, so all-encompassing, that it could claim any form of energy, any medium, as its own? The question hung in the air, a challenge not from a rebellious youth, but from a devoted student of her own teachings. It forced her to look beyond the letter of the law and into the spirit of it. For the first time in a long time, Aya Agba felt a tremor of uncertainty. Idasua's logic was impeccable, her respect undeniable. She wasn't trying to bring the outside world in. She was trying to send the temple's light out. She envisioned her children, her grandchildren, scattered across the globe, their faces illuminated by the glow of a screen, their eyes witnessing the sacred rites, their hearts connecting with their ancestral home. Perhaps the rules weren't meant to be rigid walls, but flexible guides. Perhaps the greatest act of faith was not to fear the new, but to find the divine within it. The silence stretched on, filled with the weight of generations of tradition and the promise of a new future. The world outside the temple walls had changed, and perhaps, just perhaps, it was time for the temple to find a new way to shine its light into that world, not as a concession, but as an act of power. The decision she would make would not just affect a single ceremony. It would define the future of her legacy and the temple itself. The silence in the temple felt ancient, stretching thin like a worn thread. Ija Agba's gaze moved from her granddaughter's hopeful face to the simple altar. There, the smooth, dark river stones of ore rested, just as they had for generations. Her mind crackled with the image of lightning, a wild, untamable force, a raw connection between heaven and earth. Then she thought of the drum, a tool, yes, shaped by human hands to channel that very force, to translate its chaotic energy into rhythm, into a heartbeat for the community. She looked back at the space where Adesua wanted to place the new device. Was a phone so different, really? It was also a tool, shaped by other hands, faraway hands, to channel. What, exactly? Images, sound, connection. It was a mirror that reflected things from across the world. But what did it reflect? Whose truth did it show? The question hung in the air, thick as the scent of old palm oil and dust motes dancing in the single shaft of light. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. Her voice was the sound of dry leaves settling on the forest floor. Bring it. Adasua's heart leaped, a silent cheer in her chest, but she maintained her composure, her face a mask of calm respect. She reached into her bag and produced a single, new smartphone, still in its sleek box. Iya Agba took it. The box felt surprisingly light, the device inside an alien thing, cool and unnervingly smooth in her wrinkled, story-filled hands. She carried it not to a tripod at the edge of the room, as Adesua might have expected, but to the very heart of the temple, the altar itself. With a deliberate gentleness, she unwrapped the phone and placed it right beside the Ota-Ah, the sacred stones that had pulsed with the spirit of the thunder god for longer than anyone could remember. The ancient and the modern, side by side. What followed was not a hasty, grudging gesture of acceptance. It was a full, deliberate, and powerful ritual. Aya Agba took a fresh, white kola nut, its halves representing speech and understanding. With a practiced snap, she broke it and placed one perfect piece on the black glass of the phone's screen. Next, she took a small calabash of palm oil, the lifeblood of many ceremonies, and sprinkled a few drops onto the screen, watching them bead up like tiny amber jewels on the non-porous surface. She then poured a libation of clear, cold water onto the altar, letting it trace a circle round the base of the device, cleansing the space, acknowledging the spirits of the earth. Then came the smoke. She lit a bundle of sage and awtr leaves, traditional herbs for purification and connection. As the fragrant, white smoke began to curl upwards, she slowly and meticulously passed the smoking bundle over and around the phone. She wasn't just waving it. She was bathing the device, enveloping it in sacred smoke, ensuring every edge, every port, every unseen circuit was touched by the purifying essence of the leaves. The smoke rose, carrying her intentions with it. As she worked, she began to chant, her voice low and sure, a resonant hum that filled the small temple. It was a voice that had called down spirits and blessed newborns, a voice that carried the weight of her lineage. Ano, Alaiki, she began, calling the Arika by one of his praise names, the one who is greeted first, owner of all fire that burns. The fire in the sky, the fire in the stone, the fire in the heart. What is in a wire is also yours. What is in a wave is also yours. Her words were a bridge, connecting the ancient understanding of energy to this new, mysterious form. Let this eye be your eye, she continued, her finger lightly tracing the camera lens. Let this ear be your ear, she murmured, gesturing to the microphone. Let no lies pass through it. Let no evil spirit enter by it. Let it carry only truth, only family, only the ah of this house. The chant was a binding, a setting of spiritual rules for the technology. She was not asking the phone to become something else. She was commanding it to serve the purpose of the temple, the purpose of her family. She concluded with the ultimate declaration, her voice rising with power, echoing off the mud walls. Akechi, so be it. The word was a hammer blow, sealing the ritual, making it so. With that final, resonant pronouncement of awe, the transformation was complete. In Aya Akbar's profound and practical theology, the device was no longer a secular cold mirror, a mere piece of consumer electronics. It had been initiated. It had been consecrated. It had been claimed by the spiritual forces of her household. Its circuits and lenses, its waves and wires were now vessels, sanctified to carry the essence of the ritual. Just as the stretched goatskin of the batter drum was consecrated to carry the rhythms that call down the gods, the phone was now of the temple. On the day of the festival, the atmosphere was electric. The air was thick with the smell of celebratory foods, incense, and a collective anticipation of the community. The blessed phone was placed on a small, unobtrusive stand at the back of the room. A small piece of red ritual cloth or S-color tucked beneath it. Adesua, her face a mixture of reverence and excitement, was its designated operator. When the drums started, their polyrhythmic thunder shaking the very ground. It was a call to all worlds, and then Iya Agba began to lead the chants. Her voice, amplified not by a microphone but by the sheer force of her spirit, soared over the drumming, the vibrant, pulsating energy of the room, the call and response of the songs, the shuffling, stamping feet of the dancers. It was all captured by that single, consecrated lens. Miles away, across oceans and time zones, the family gathered around their own screens. They watched, not as passive observers, but as participants. They saw the sweat on the drummers' brows. They saw the ecstatic expressions on the dancers' faces. They saw Aya Agba, a pillar of grace and power at the center of it all. And they wept. They wept with joy, with relief, with a feeling of connection so profound, an intimacy they hadn't dared hope for. The cold mirror was now a warm window, a portal that bridged the distance, not just geographically, but spiritually. They were home, and Iya Agbar, throughout the entire ceremony, She never once looked at the phone. She didn't need to. Her work was done. She had made her peace with this new world, not by rejecting it, but by embracing it on her own terms. She had drawn a circle of awe, of spiritual authority and intention around the new technology and brought it inside her world, sanctifying it. The river of tradition had found a new, smooth stone to flow around, and she, the steadfast keeper of the riverbank, had simply learned a new knot to tie her net. The drum and the mirror were no longer at war in her house. The ancient rhythm and the modern reflection were in harmony, because the mirror, through ritual and intention, had been taught to reflect only the truth of the drum. Welcome back under the baobab. The fire before us is now just a bed of deep, glowing coals, pulsing with a quiet, enduring heat. Our journey into the world where thunder gods meet smartphones is complete. We've explored the strange and wonderful space where ancient traditions are not just surviving, but thriving in the digital age. We have witnessed the shock of a text message oracle, felt the expansive intimacy of a live-streamed possession, and marveled at the unnerving wisdom of a devotional algorithm. And through it all, we saw the profound, personal compromise of an elder priestess, blessing new tools to carry an old spirit forward. We began our journey at a crossroads, and it seems fitting that we end at a synthesis. The story of the drum and the mirror is not a story of replacement, but of reflection. The drum is the ancient, enduring heartbeat. It's the generator of rhythm, the call to community, the engine of trance. It's the very soul of the gathering. The mirror, in this case the smartphone screen, is the modern surface. It captures, it connects, and it refracts that ancient heartbeat across unimaginable distances, across time and space. It takes the pulse of the village and broadcasts it to the world. Think about that for a moment. It's a powerful image. The old and the new aren't at war. They're in a conversation. One provides the substance, the other provides the means of transmission. They complement each other in ways we're only just beginning to understand. The children of our war have shown us that faith is not brittle. It is incredibly adaptive. It's not some museum piece to be preserved under glass, gathering dust. No, it is a living river. Just as the divination said, a river will always find its path, flowing round obstacles, finding new channels, carving new beds in the rock. The essence, the water, remains the same. It's our universal thirst for connection, for meaning, for justice, and for that transformative power of the sacred. But the vessels that hold and carry that water can and do change. They evolve with us. They shift from a dream whispered in the night to a text message pinging on a phone. They expand from a local drum circle under a baobab tree to a global live stream reaching thousands. They adapt from cowrie shells cast on a mat to cloud-based data analyzed by an algorithm. Let's just take a final, soft pause here together and listen to the night. In the quiet, you can hear so many things. Is that the distant rumble of thunder on the horizon? Or is it just the low hum of the modern world, the sound of traffic and electricity? For the children of Shango, the answer might just be, it is both. And that's the beautiful, profound truth at the heart of this story. The divine speaks the language of its children. If the language of its children now includes emojis, hashtags, and fiber optics, then the Oryxa will learn to speak in lightning bolts and sacred GIFs. So, what is the ultimate lesson here? It's one of discernment, not rejection. It's about taking the new tools that technology offers us and blessing them. Just as Aya Agba did with the smartphone, we must consecrate them so that they serve the spirit rather than distract from it. The challenge for this new generation, and for all of us, is to remember the source of the rhythm, even as we marvel at its digital echo. We have to make sure the mirror reflects the truth of the ceremony and doesn't become the object of worship itself. It's a fine line to walk, a delicate balance to maintain. The technology is a conduit, not the destination. The coals are fading now, their deep red glow softening into the darkness. The story of adaptation of these sacred conversations happening in new and exciting mediums is told. The drum still beats, the mirror still reflects, and in their incredible interplay, a new, complex, and vibrant faith continues to dance, alive and full of energy. The night is deep, the air is cool, and the sky above is filled with stars. Our time together has come to an end, but the stories, like the rhythm of the drum, will echo on. Thank you for sharing this journey with us. You are under Baobab skies.